like to start by acknowledging that we're meeting today on the traditional lands of the Kulin Nation and pay my respects to their elders past, present and emerging, and pay respects to elders of any other communities that may be with us today. Could I also ask that you please now turn your phones to silent? And I'll start by introducing myself. My name is Wes Snelling. I'm a performer. I do comedy, cabaret and music. Sorry, that's a bit glary, but I'll get there. Good. Also direct comedy shows. I mentor and facilitate young people and adults. And my main gig at the moment is the producer of comedy festivals, education development programs, Class Clowns, which is a national program for young people in comedy. We had the competition yesterday, and also Deadly Funny, which is a national competition and program for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. And next to me, I have the wonderful Steph Tisdell. Steph is a working comedian. She sprang into the comedy scene in 2014 when she won the highly coveted Deadly Funny National Comedy Competition, making her the funniest Aboriginal person in Australia. Steph then moved to Scotland and was runner-up in Hilarity by its Best Newcomer and a semi-finalist in the prestigious So You Think You're Funny competition at the Edinburgh Fringe. Steph has toured across the country with Aboriginal Comedy All-Stars and performed at various live comedy venues and events throughout Australia. In 2018, Steph premiered her first full-length solo show, Identity Stephed, which was nominated and was nominated for Best Newcomer in the Melbourne International Comedy Festival. Steph's just opened up her second show, a solo show this week titled The Pyramid, on at the Vic Spa Vic Hotel during the festival. And we've just been travelling around the country together, mentoring and facilitating workshops for Class Clowns and Deadly Funny. Steph is also currently going viral right now.
I'm sick as a dog.
Online. No. Yeah. There's a great little clip going around that Steph did on the gala that's going around. So after you leave here, not now, after you leave here, check it out. It's awesome. Please welcome Steph to the panel. And then I'm going to jump over to Evan Watts. Evan Watts, after graduating from the Victorian College of the Arts Drama School in the early 90s, Evan made his way in the Melbourne independent theatre scene, with his plays being performed by a range of theatre companies, La Mama, Playbox, Griffin Theatre and on ABC Radio. Retraining as a teacher in 2003, continuing a proud family tradition, he now heads an innovative Year 9 city program at Eltham College that prioritises community engagement and authentic outcomes in an urban environment. He is passionate about the power of storytelling and utilising a drama-based curriculum to release the creative power of the next generation of change makers. Please welcome Evan Watts. To the right of Evan, we have Meg Upton, who is an educator, a teaching artist, a lecturer and researcher in drama education. She's taught in primary schools and secondary schools and currently works at Deakin University. A previous education manager at Malthouse Theatre and MTC, a one-time judge of Class Clowns, and an advocate for the development of a compulsory unit for teachers called Humour in the Classroom 101. Meg has also created the Melbourne International Comedy Festival resource for teachers, Funny Makes You Feel Good. Please welcome Meg Upton to the panel. Patti Fawcett is 15 years old and is a student at Bendigo South East College. She's great. And yesterday she was the winner of the Melbourne International Comedy Festival's 2019 Class Clowns National Grand Final. Give her a round of applause. Yes. And Patti's also performing in Up Next Comedy throughout the Comedy Festival, which is on at the Arts Centre. So check that out as well. Patti, I'm actually going to start with you. How do you feel after yesterday?
Oh, I mean, I feel pretty happy. I feel quite underqualified here now. Now that you've read out everyone's bios, like they did this and that, I'm just like, cool, right? But no, I'm just very happy.
Glowing, buzzing. Yeah, good. Well deserved. Can you tell us a little bit about the routine that you did yesterday?
Yeah, so my routine, it jumped around a bit, but it kind of started off just about like my family and like how hairy my legs are, stuff like that. But it went pretty political, so I was talking about differences between like America and Australia and all of that kind of thing, and like climate change and how some Australian politicians and Australian people have reacted to that.
And what was
15?
Yeah, at 15, exactly. No, but this is what's happening. People are thinking now. It's good. It's really good. It's true. That's what I'm noticing. How did you come up with the ideas of the material, and also what was it that made you go, I want to be funny? What got you there?
For this particular set, or just in general?
Let's go with this particular set. Yeah.
I think, all of the stuff that comes out of it, so about climate change and politicians and just like the world in general, is all stuff that teens are talking about right now. It's the conversations we're having at school, and it's just what's being talked about. So like all of my jokes were kind of just things that I'd said in conversation that had made a couple people giggle, and then I just kind of went, okay.
Okay,
and
awesome.
started banding it together.
And so what is it that got you from that conversation with friends to going, I'm going to stand on a stage and do it in a stand-up comedy routine?
Well, first off, I'd signed up and I needed to do something.
Yeah.
So I kind of got there and I was like, well, okay, we're here now. But I just hoped it would be funny. It was just kind of a hope thing. I was like, you know what, if I can make a couple of kids laugh who are kind of mean, then I can probably make a couple of audience members laugh as well.
Great.
We hope.
And you did. I'm going to just ask a quick question off the top, which is, and I'd like a kind of yes or no answer, just to gauge what people's thoughts on the perspective you're coming from. Do you think comedy can be taught, or do you have to have funny bones? Like, are people just, do they have to have that thing? So the question is, can comedy be taught to anyone? Steph?
Absolutely.
Patti?
Yeah.
Meg?
Totally.
Evan?
Well, I'm an English teacher and we don't do just yes or no. Well, I'm going to be controversial and say no.
Good, I needed a controversy here. Otherwise we'll just be, yes.
But I'm going to qualify that later, I hope.
No, absolutely.
Otherwise you'll beat me up at the end or something.
Yes. So, Evan, we will start with you. You've been encouraging people in Year 9 to do comedy for quite some time now. Why? Like, what's the...
Oh, well, it was funny you were saying about the political thing. I think it's such an empowering thing, seeing young people get up and tell jokes, and it's such an authentic thing. I think we mollycoddle kids a lot. I think we try to kind of make education kind of safe and all that sort of stuff, whereas I think actually giving them real challenges, but authentic challenges within, the scope that they can actually pull off there's nothing, you can't beat that. And it's going to sound very sucky now, but Class Clowns is just a fantastic program for that, because it's standing up in front of a whole lot of people and telling jokes, and sounds like a very scary thing, but the way that it's run, it's actually a really safe environment. I mean, we had this year one student who, because I think what I do sometimes is just pick out the kid who I think would be great, who doesn't know that they're great. And that's kind of, and people think Class Clowns, it's about the rough kid at the back who's making those jokes. It's actually the kid who's not saying anything, I reckon. It's the kid that I reckon can be really funny. And somebody like Derek, who we had doing in the Class Clowns, who turned up and he wasn't even going to do anything. And 2 hours later with Sammy J, a great mentor, and he was on stage improvising in front of a live audience.
So what happens at Class Clowns is that we have a mentor, like a professional comedian like Sammy J or Steph Tisdell, who will work with people who have come in with some ideas and help mentor to either generate material, but more often than not, people do have material, and it's just kind of tweaking it a bit to give confidence to get people to get up on stage and actually.
That was an unusual situation because we had a few people pull out, so he was kind of required to kind of make the show go on. But still, it was quite an experience. And
one of your successes I want to mention is a guy called William McKenna, who won Class Clowns in 2015, and from that went on to got an agent and got on telly, and is now one of the main stars in Harry Potter the play this year, and he's incredible. Has anyone seen Harry Potter the play? One person. He's really good. He's probably the funniest in it, I would suggest. Like, he's really got that sense of timing. Do you think that was something that like when you, so you were a teacher for Will and suggested Class Clowns to him, for example, or to go into comedy. So did he have, what was it about him that made you go, he's going to...
I don't know. I think it's, again, he's a kind of slightly quiet kid in the classroom. He's a kid who probably was on the receiving end of, unwanted attention. I don't know what you would call it. He's getting teased a bit and things like that. But he always had a comeback, and in a quiet, unstated way. And I said to him, I thought he'd do really well in Class Clowns, and I signed him up. And then he came to me, 2 days before and said, no, I can't do it. And I said, oh, it's too late. No, I've signed you up. They'll it's a thing. You've written it. It's in writing. And he was like, no, but I can't. And and the rest, as they say, is
history. But well, I guess, and this isn't about Class Clowns actually, but just in terms of his, because it's the other experience he's had with comedy and getting stage time. Like, do you think that made a difference to him being able to be where he is now?
Oh.
In terms of, would he have been able to do the comedy the way he does comedy?
If you don't get a mention in the Oscar speech, then I would be. I'd think you're getting ripped off. I think for somebody like Will, it was obviously fantastic to win the Class Clowns, but then when you got him involved in the sort of the development squad, LOL squad, and that pushed him along even further, and then he got an agent out of that, and I think it was I think for a lot of kids, they don't know stuff about themselves. They don't know that they've got that in them, and once they can see it and you give them that chance, then they'll run with it.
That's right.
Yeah.
Meg, I was going to jump to you next, or were you going to add to that?
I just wanted to say the notion of giving kids the opportunity, that's part of the teaching. So it's if we talk about can you teach kids comedy, maybe the first step is giving them that confidence, recognising something in them and affirming the fact that they can go on and then build on any innate skills that they've got. So I think we can identify that as being that, who's that champion for them in terms of enabling them to do that, and then the skills can grow from there.
And so, that was going to be my question.
Oh,
so
no.
No, is how, Meg? How do you teach comedy? How?
Oh, God. I'm just going to say here, I don't have the lived experience of being a comedian at all, so I defer to Steph and Patti here and Wes and everyone else. But I think as a drama teacher and a theatre studies teacher, we're in the business of performance as much as social impact and giving kids confidence. So we're in the process of getting them to learn lines and to think about what it means, particularly to engage with an audience, and to then notice things in them that we can then go, hey, that's great, you try that, and you can direct them and you can kind of pull out those things. I do agree with Evan though that it is often the quieter kids who reveal in those moments where you're giving them the opportunity that there's a spark and there's something going on there.
I agree, because I certainly, and I'd love to hear your opinion on this too, not just mine. I think I got into comedy because I was very quiet when I was younger, and I just observed. I was taking everything in, and when I got an opportunity to talk, wouldn't shut me up. Now, Steph, you have been mentoring for Deadly Funny and for Class Clowns, and quite successfully, and you're very, very good at it and encouraging. I mean, a lot of it is confidence building, but why do you think it's important for people who are doing comedy? Why do you think it's important to have that mentor or have that direction?
I honestly think that comedy is such a huge... It's a place where you can really learn confidence and learn a lot about yourself. The whole thing is that comedy is the truth wrapped up in a little bow, right? So showing people that they've got that platform is what it's all about. And I think one of the main things that I always say to whoever I'm mentoring or whenever I'm giving advice is just that comedy is the most intimate thing you will ever do in the least intimate setting. Like, you can be so vulnerable, and that makes all the difference in the world. Because I actually was always very loud growing up, but without saying, I was very, very anxious. And I think having a moment to be still on a stage or take in a moment and feel everybody else's energies and not have to feel like I had to make up for it by contributing a lot of energy always settles me. I speak slower on stage. I'm more articulate. My brain's open and clear. And so I think the main thing is, like, their material is a representation of them. So I very rarely touch it. I will just remind them that the more authentic and real it is, the better, because, like, it's such a generosity to perform, because it's very selfless, right? It's for other people, and you have to be so observant of each face, it's just the feeling of a room. Once you remind somebody of, oh, what a big task that is and how good this is, then the nerves tend to go away and they want to give a lot of it, you know? Like, they want to be very generous with it. So that's kind of how I approach it, I guess.
Yeah. And you are very, very good at it. I will jump to, I was going to ask you, Patti, I feel like you may have answered it, but I was going to ask you what comedy's actually done for you on the confidence level. Like, were you a really shy person before comedy? Like, what was your general vibe, and how has comedy kind of taken you to another place?
It's a bit. So, like, in primary school, right, I was, like, loud. I was quite, like, a loud kid, and I would just kind of yell things out in class and stuff. And then kind of when I got to high school, I got a bit quieter. And then I remember I was in, like, an art class one day, and I, like, made this weird song up about all the dumb things I'd done in the past year. And I was, like, so incredibly nervous to, like, show anyone the song, just because I didn't feel like I could sing well, I could play the guitar well. And then I played it, and it didn't matter that I wasn't singing well, playing the guitar well, because they were laughing at it. And so then to come to, like, class clowns even last year and just get through the regional round, I was just such a big confidence boost, because it was, you know, it was the only kind of time in my life where it wasn't, like, mattering whether I could, you know, write well, do maths well, whether I looked really good, or, you know, all these things that are generally what teenagers are being pushed into. None of that mattered anymore. It was all just about, like, my opinion and whether or not I was actually making someone else happy, as opposed to whether or not I was, like, aesthetically pleasing.
Sorry, can I please just cut in and say, you are amazing. This is ridiculous.
I'm crying. So, my God.
Just give it all up. Be a motivational speaker. You're incredible. So, I'm so sorry for interrupting.
No, I'm going to take us another way now. This might hurt. No, I was going to say, can comedy, though, take us the other way? Like, as in, obviously, you know, not everyone laughs all the time. And sometimes you bomb on stage, and I'll start with you, Steph, on that one.
Thank you.
No.
You know that one well, don't you, Steph? You're always bombing.
Never. No.
It is the worst feeling in the world to bomb, because, like, especially because I'm a really high energy performer, and that if I was a low energy performer, I don't think I would care. But you just have to be like, just keep it up, and you're like, oh, I want to go home, you know. But still, like, even that stuff, I just, like, when I feel really bad about a gig, and I'm very hard on myself, so it's quite often, but somebody taught me the 11-11 rule. I don't know who taught me this, but they said, by the next 11 o'clock, you have to let it go. If it was your best performance, let it go at 11. If it was your worst performance, let it go at 11. And then somebody else taught me, if you are sad, just get angry instead and channel it back into your set by being bitter and being like, they didn't even get it. And so that's my other way. I mean, I will never express that out loud because I don't want people to think that I'm that person. But sometimes I'll be like, oh, it was a good joke. Whatever, they didn't get it. And then, yeah, let it go.
And what about you, Patti? I'm not suggesting you've bombed. No, but if you, are there times that it has been not quite worked for you for confidence reasons?
Yeah, no, I've definitely, like, even I play music and I do some drama stuff for all of you who don't know. And there's definitely been times where I've, like, made a joke or done something and it just hasn't worked. The entire audience has just been like, and yeah, your confidence level just completely drops and you feel absolutely horrible. But again, like after that, it kind of just becomes a funny story. And it's like, oh, remember that time I did terribly? Oh,
Yeah.
kind of thing. So I feel like it's just about, because if you hold on to that, you'll never be able to do it again. And the next time you hop up on stage, you'll just think it's going to happen and then you won't perform well.
But isn't it also like I sometimes think to myself, I go, honestly, I'll be totally honest with all of you. You have no idea who I am. That man is sleeping in the front row. Like, nobody knows who I am, and you will not remember me. Like, if I run into you in the street, if I've done a bad gig, you're not going to be like, what a terrible gig. You're just going to walk past me. And I can't tell each of your faces individually, do you know what I mean? So you just go like, you know, unless you say something offensive, in which case you should probably be self-reflecting, you know.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously, I guess it's important. Meg, I'll ask you, like, do you think it's, and Evan as well, about important, have you experienced a situation with teenagers where a young person has, like, had a bad experience in this situation and hasn't been able to pull themselves out of it? Like, what kind of, how do you pull people out of that situation if they've fallen in comedy?
Okay. Well, I texted you the other day and I said, after the last heat, and I said, because it's 5 years we've been doing... Yeah. So I've been taking students to Class Clowns for 5 years. And it's true. I mean, I've never had a student that come off stage and regret what they did. I mean, comedy is... I mean, you're either funny or you're not. Like, that's what I really like about it. And quite often I'm pumping kids up because I'm saying, but it worked, you know, because they can be incredibly hard on themselves, some students. But I don't know, it's just the mere fact that they got up on stage and they took that risk, and okay, so they recognised that they didn't get as many laughs as the previous person or the person after them, but they did it. They have a real sense of pride out of doing that, and you get a sense of, you know, confidence from that. So
I really like the 11-11 rule too, by the way, because I feel like it does work the other way too, in that people can over-ego. Like, you know, if you hang it, it's like, oh, that gig I did 3 years ago was amazing. Like, I cannot just, you know, it is important also to not cut yourself down, oh my gosh, but just to move on from that level as well, I think.
Well, if you accept that, you'll never get better.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Like, you should always be going like, but now what am I going to do next? Or I want to make sure that's consistent, therefore, blah, 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 blah.
Can I just ask, do you, Patti and Steph, do you have like critical friends who you can hang out with afterwards? And
Just going to say that.
yeah?
I was going to say, I mean, obviously I'm not sure for adults, but definitely for teenagers, so much of whether or not you try something again, if it goes badly, is down to the way your friends react to it and whether or not they're supportive of it. Because I know in like personal experience and watching other people when something's gone wrong, if your friends are really supportive and go, you know, it's okay, you can try it again, you generally will. But if your friends aren't supportive, I mean, because you care about what your friends think so much, and yeah, I really think it depends on how they react more than how the audience reacts.
Yeah, wow.
So, you just...
Yeah, I know, right? Just talk for ages.
You're just blowing my mind.
Evan, I was going to say, though, you did throw in a little bit of a you're either funny or you're not comment in there. So I am
so that's where I get to qualify it. It was just that idea of, I know it's the alliteration of the T's, you know, can it be taught and all that stuff, but... I just have, when I hear that, you know, I imagine a teacher standing in front of a whiteboard with a whiteboard marker and saying, okay, now we're doing comedy 101 and we're going to analyse this joke, and, you know, and I mean, that's the worst kind of teaching anyway, but I certainly wouldn't go there in terms of teaching comedy in that sense. I would say more, it's not that you have to be funny or something. I reckon anyone can be funnier. You can teach anyone to be funnier. But from my experience, the students have to kind of engage first. They have to want, like, I would never run it as a compulsory thing. Everyone is now going to do Class Clowns. You know, like,
well, it's interesting because there are schools that do.
I know there are schools that do it. I probably wouldn't be one of those.
One of those, yeah. No, and it's become quite successful. I know that Melbourne Girls College does it with Year 9s as an example, and it's part of the English and literacy, because it essentially, you know, under the theory that comedy is storytelling with a punchline. So it's about, you know, compulsory in that people have to, over the course of a semester, write a routine, and then kind of they can work with people on a sketch, or but come up and see the world from different perspective, I guess.
Well, I think that thing about the storytelling, and Steph was mentioning about the truth of it, and the funniest things, are the students talking about things that have happened in their lives, usually painful things or embarrassing things or awkward things or things they're angry about. So, but being able to take that thing that was actually really embarrassing, and I mean, Will's whole routine when he won was all about desperately wanting to go for a pee on a very long bus ride with all his peers, and having to pee in the middle of a motorway with the whole bus watching, and and he turned that into a whole routine, and it was
good.
But at the time it would have been excruciating.
Yeah.
But he turned it into something that was actually took him a long way in the end.
So I guess because also, and I'll jump to you in a minute, Meg, about teaching comedy. I really want to know more about. No, I do. But it's just interesting, that thing of teaching, because I think there's also, when we talk about comedy too, we're also talking about writers, comedy writers, and it's a whole industry of people who are just, there's so many different facets to the comedy industry, and I guess the funny, can comedy be taught, is it funny or not scenario is, I mean, let's put it this way. Without naming names, I believe there are people in this industry who are high-profile comedians who weren't necessarily born with funny bones, but are making a pretty damn amazing career out of being great joke tellers now. And they've figured out the formula for themselves. That's a statement more than a question. So I'm gonna. That's what I think. Does anyone disagree?
You have to name names now. Now you have to.
Absolutely not.
No way. You've got to still work in this industry, don't you, Wes?
Yes, I do.
I was going to say, in response to that, the formula. First of all, to go back, I think the process of engaging with learning about comedy is as equally important as the performance of it. And I think that's probably why schools might say, let's do a unit on comedy, because the whole process of giving voice, affirming story, allowing personal story to matter, to allow something like on the way here on the tram, for example, someone started singing and the entire tram started singing, and I thought, wow, that's a great comedy routine. I could do that, but I'm not a comedian, so I'm not going to do that. But the other thing I was going to probably pick up on, Wes, is the formula. There are probably some key things that you can teach kids about audience and audience relationship, and I think Steph really outlined that really well before, about how do you get them to engage with an audience, be complicit with the audience, or move away from the audience. I think that's a skill you can actually teach them. I think you can teach comic timing, and I think you can do that with good modelling. Like, kids will, if you give them, okay, who are the comedians you like the best and why, they can kind of deconstruct the process of why that comedian makes them laugh, and that in a way might start to build some skills or ways of moving forward to practice that themselves.
I'm going to jump now, Meg, to you've mentioned you want to talk about the term class clowns itself.
Yeah, I'm a researcher, so I did some research. I was really interested to know why we call kids class clowns, the ones who are in the classroom, and I think Patti, you talked about in primary school, you felt maybe a bit like that. And I don't know, Steph, whether you ever felt you were a class clown in school.
I was.
Yeah, and there's two terms that came up when I did my research, and they were that the kid in the class who's called the class clown is the one who disrupts and who distracts. And that can probably drive teachers nuts. But I also thought, I wondered what you guys think about, is comedy, is this purpose to disrupt and distract anyway?
100%.
Because I think it's a really good, I think if you're going to say the class clown is the kid who distracts and disrupts, I think, yeah, that sounds pretty much like a comedian to me.
What a cool thing to point out too. Thank you for that. Like, I think that's, but it totally is, right? Like, I do a lot of material about my heritage. I'm Indigenous, and when I was at high school, actually, I was like terrified to talk about my heritage. It was like the secret that everybody knew. Do you know what I mean? But I didn't talk about it because I was terrified of the can of worms that I'd be opening if I overtly expressed my absolute pride and what that would come back to me, like how that would come back to haunt me. I was absolutely terrified. And now I find so much pride in being given an opportunity to stand on a stage and tell my life experiences in a funny way where people go, oh, I guess I've never thought of that before. And I was doing an interview the other day and somebody said, what do you think about like women in comedy and is it hard being a woman in comedy? And I said, it's not too bad for me or my generation now, but being an Indigenous woman in comedy, I know Shirley Hood, and she kind of started doing comedy when I was already starting comedy, so I didn't have anybody to look up to, the style, how you could be, how crass you could go, how like bold you could be as a female Indigenous comedian. And it is utterly terrifying to be trying to pave out and find out if it's okay. But it's really, really, really made me, like I studied law before I did comedy, and it's made me a massive advocate because I've gone, well, if I know that that's how I felt and how scared I was to even have a voice that could be heard, well, hopefully just my existence means that somebody else won't have to feel that. And if I could just keep that encouragement, then once you've got, just a strong 3 Aboriginal comedians, you know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, Steph, I certainly know that through these programs that's already happening. There are people who are saying, I know, that they're looking to you for the help and mentorship, and also that they're going, oh my gosh, if Steph can do it, like the Deadly Funny program is growing because they're seeing people like Steph and Kevin Kopinuri and Andy Saunders and Sean Trooper and going, oh, if they can do it, that means I can too. And it really is
but that's
working.
The thing. It is such a... And it's exactly what teachers do. Like, Wes will probably attest to this. We had this most amazing group of boys who actually were runners-up yesterday in the national finals of Class Clowns, who came from, honestly, just so they go to a school that's for Indigenous and Torres Strait, Torres Strait and Aboriginal kids who are from either communities or the islands in the Torres Strait that don't have good education, right? And so they go to this little boarding school, this all-boys boarding school, and they have this one teacher who has completely changed everything. A lot of these boys can naturally dance and want to be dancers. So she said, okay, but if you want to make it in the world, you have to be trained in classical ballet. And so now there's a class of classical ballet with these, the toughest, manliest men, you know what I mean? Because that's what you want to do. If you want to do that, here's the stepping stones. And so they just wrote their sketch on the day, rocked up, just had a lot of fun with each other on stage, and then it was so fun to just be like, you do realise that's not everybody can do that. That's a real talent, right? But had their teacher not seen that, this was to both Evan and Meg, it makes such a difference. And thank you so much for championing that or understanding exactly what that can mean for somebody, just that we so rarely hold humour or just being a funny person in high esteem, but what it's actually capable of, and that disruption and that distraction in a friendship group, in a classroom, at home, through the hard times, what that actually contributes to society is massive. So people like you who advocate for that, it makes a massive difference.
It really does for the teachers. And this teacher you talk about, Paula, who's at Abergawi, the school you're talking about is just incredible. I mean, she went above and beyond to get those boys. They drove 4 hours just to be at this one little heat in Cairns, and it was just 4 hours back, 4 hours up, 4 hours back the same day, just to engage these kids in the program. It was really, truly incredible. and thank you, Steph, for talking about that too.
Can I add to that?
Yes,
really quickly?
please.
Also, you should totally do the inspirational speaking as well. We should do it as a duo.
Let's
Just come
do
and
it.
Inspire.
Patti and Steph.
I was going to kind of add to that, and I think, like, comedy has this incredible ability, and obviously I'm speaking from a teenager's perspective and about other teenagers.
You don't have to
but
put that there.
this incredible ability to take something that is hurting you and use it against to make other people happy and in turn make yourself happy. Like, so much of what I talk about, my friends talk about, is like I have a joke about how hairy my legs are, which is actually something that I'm quite insecure about. But by making that joke happen, people, like last night, people started clapping about it, and I was like, cool. And it has this incredible ability to make people think about things that they wouldn't be thinking about. Like, I saw Sarah Keyworth last night, who's a stand-up comedian. Had a lot of her set was about how we treat young girls and the things we say to young girls, and it was just incredible because, you're there to see comedy, and then she brings in this whole other premise, and so you really start to think about it, and it gets you all in your feelings and stuff, and then she pulls you back out and you're laughing again. But you walk away having had a good time, and it's changed the way you're thinking, and because you're remembering that as a happy memory, that thought of we need to treat women better and we need to be careful about how we talk to kids carries through in a way that isn't disrespectful to anyone, and it isn't, pushed in your face. No one feels like they're being attacked, but that thought process is still there. And that's just an incredible power that can be utilised so well and can be said to so many people that, at a base where they can understand it and interpret it.
Patti Fawcett for Prime Minister. Yes.
Could I add the heartwarming story in there too with, because we've talked about Jet in the past and his experience, and one of my students who, quite a quiet kid. He had quite a pronounced lisp, and which he would get teased about. But he had this desire; he wanted to be a comedian, and he turned up to one of the workshops that we get at our school. We get a comedian to come in and help run it, and the comedian said, "It's got to be about your lisp," and he was like, "No, I can't." And he said, "No. If you walk out on that stage and you've got a lisp, but you're not talking about your lisp, people are they're going to wonder why." And so he made him on the spot rewrite his whole routine, and it was about a lisp, and he made it all the way to the national final, and he actually ended up doing that routine at a school assembly and brought the whole school around, So from this one kid in sort of year 7 and 8 who was getting teased about a lisp, in year 12 he was the toast of the school. So, just that thing of taking the thing that's actually used against you to actually get over on other people, and weaponized it, and he's performing now
in Up Next with Patti Fawcett during the comedy festival at the Arts Centre. Yeah. Yes. So I want to got just a couple of minutes left before we throw over to you guys for questions and answers. I want to talk a little bit about offence. So, not offence, offence. As in, obviously, when people are starting out in comedy, no matter what age, people go to material, especially if they're talking about material that they might be insecure about or stuff that's happened to them that can be often offensive. Or, you were talking earlier about how crass you can go and all that kind of stuff. So how do you know when you're mentoring people or when you're teaching comedy about how offensive you can go? Like what makes a difference between, and this is a big question to end with, but what makes a difference between something that's offensive and funny? It's a big question, but
2 minutes, Wes.
You've got 2 minutes. Go, Meg.
I can't answer that question. I really can't.
Depends on who you're offending.
I think offence. This is. I'm going to get someone else to ansster this question. Sorry.
Yeah,
we can
no, that's totally
It's
fine. I
charged.
threw it at you at the last minute just to make just to wake everyone up.
Yeah.
Steph.
I set up. That's right. Well, I reckon it depends on who you're offending. Like, I don't know, Aiden, another student of mine. I feel like I'm talking about all these students as if you know them, and you don't. You don't know them at all. I know who that. But Aiden was just done a comedy routine, and his one is because he's got long blonde hair and doesn't dress in a masculine ways. And he gets quite often mistaken for being a girl, and that was his routine. And I don't know. we got into some risky area there for a 15-year-old still at school talking about being hit on by a lesbian, and and how that was kind of weird, and but he wasn't making a joke of that in the sense that he found that offensive. He just found that very embarrassing, but in a school context, making those kinds of jokes can be seen as being a bit out there. So, but I think that's really great because you're pushing the boundaries of. He's trying to find out who he is as a person. He probably doesn't know. He's only 15. He's still got a long way to go, I would imagine. But he's finding out in a really supportive and exciting way. Is he offending some people along the way? Possibly. But I don't know that I'd be caring about those people that he's offending. But anyway.
It can depend too on who you are and the joke you're saying. I couldn't make a joke about being black because I'm not black. Obviously, because it would probably end up being quite racist, the same way someone who's straight, depending on the joke, wouldn't make a joke about being gay because it could end up being offensive.
But I think it's one of these things, right? I think my initial thought was it depends on the intention, but actually I don't think it does so much because it's down to what the audience is, right? I genuinely think the biggest difference between if you're going to be offensive or not is smack a microphone is whether you're authentic. This is something that I always think, when I'm talking to a kid who's written a set or something and they tell it and I just think all you are doing is ticking a box of what you believe to be funny and there is no bit of you in it, there's no truth, there's no whatever, then crossing that line is always going to be offensive. But if there's a real authenticity to it, there's a gentleness to it, there's an understanding of that intention, and I think that's what makes it. Do you know what I mean? I think that intention always comes down, will always be shown if that person's authentic. If they're not, that's when it...
And I guess that's what I wanted to raise is there's material, in terms of the offensive side of things, is there's material that one person can do... say, for example, there are certain comedians who probably swear a lot on stage, and and there's some. But if you go and see a teenager just swearing and randomly swearing, then it's just not. It's everyone kind of freezes up, even though those teenagers are probably swearing like that around the playground. Let's be honest. Do we still call it playground? I don't know.
No, we don't.
No,
it's not. What? It's the space, and. And so,
we're not on Star Trek, dude.
So I guess my point is it's about audiences, it's about knowing your audience and all that kind of stuff. But I think also in terms of intention, it's about the context of when you're doing comedy, you're using words. So with any words should be placed the way you want them. And it is about that intention, but also about, there's stuff that some people can now say on stage because an audience knows who they are, they have a profile, and so they can take it a bit further, I guess, because they would know that intention that you're talking about. Whereas if you get up and you just see a comedian going, I'm not going to give an example.
Expletive.
Yeah. Then it's not, it's like, I'm not connected, I don't know you. You don't get to do that to me yet.
I think that's
anyway.
really cool. Lived experience, I was going to say... is your lived experience is your truth and your authenticity, isn't it? Or your observed experience. I think that's what you guys are saying about that, and that's what provides the context in which the audience and the comedian are kind of sharing that. And when that doesn't quite work, I think that's when the offence can kind of occur. So you're right, it is about lived experience, context, and audience relationship with
There's
audience
also
as well.
Groups of people that in certain places, it's you can kind of be offensive to and people don't care as much. I make quite a bit of fun of the far right in my set, but because I'm in Melbourne, most people are yeah, that makes sense. So I feel even though I'm being quite offensive because, and it's also that thing I remember Geraldine Hickey said to me one time. She said, you always punch up in comedy. So you're always, if you're making fun of a group of people, it's a group of people more privileged than you or above you. Never, when you punch down, it becomes offensive and mean. If you're punching up, people are generally okay with it.
Good. Another round of applause for Patti. And for Geraldine Hickey. who's not here today, but she's a great comedian who's also doing a show in the festival. Anyway, and a fabulous mentor. She's always an advocate for young up-and-coming comedians also. So, with a short time left, we're going to do a question and answer. So does anyone happen to have any questions for any of the panel? You just put up your hand and there'll be someone who'll deliver a microphone to you out of thin air. Any questions?
Thanks.
There's one down the front.
Could you teach Peter Dutton to be funny?
If we just put a mirror in
That
front
is
of
a
him, that might be
great
enough.
question.
I dare say he is funny because he is so fun to make fun of. Does that make him funny? Yeah, I reckon you could teach him how to be funny. Yeah, I'll do it. Hook me up.
We've actually got him hidden backstage.
Yeah,
We're gonna bring him out now.
Surprise.
Evan?
I think I'd struggle with Peter. If people wanted to be funny, if he generally rolled up, if I did my call out and Peter was like, yeah, no, I'll do Class Clowns, I'm not turning him away. I'd be thinking we've got a bit of work to do. But
I think he's got a lot of material.
But you raised the point. You've got to want to do it.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Does that answer your question? Did you have a question also?
You raised the issue about swearing in comedy. I'm amazed how many comedians these days drop four-letter words every sentence, more than one in a sentence. And when you look at the traditional great comedians, American English that I grew up with, none of them ever swore, and they were fantastic comedians. I wonder why people feel obliged to swear so much in comedy routines.
I think I'll start just by responding and saying, where did what comedians were you listening to? No, Bob Hope, etc. Yes, sure. I mean, that's a difference. Different times, obviously, all that kind of thing. But also, I agree. I mean, I'm really a big advocate for, like, use it as a word. Use it like any other word. Place it well. If you're going to swear, make it be part of the joke. Like, I find working with a lot of comedians and seeing the same show, for example, over and over, I can tell when someone's nervous. Often I find if people are nervous, they're using a swear word to buy some time to figure out what their next move is.
Oh, sorry.
Yes, please go.
I grew up. I was a baby once. I grew up and I never swore. Like, nobody in my family swears, and I just was such a nerd. I'd be like, swearing is really uncool and it makes you seem uncool. I mean, I wasn't that person, but like kind of. And I hated swearing. I never swore. And this is not an exaggeration. The first time I swore more than once in a 10-minute period was the first time I ever did comedy. And I don't know why. Maybe because I'd seen other people do it. Maybe because I knew that it was weird for me, so it felt like I was rebelling or something like that. It is definitely a nervous tick. I am completely capable of doing comedy that has absolutely no swearing in it. And it's easy. I do it fairly often. But when I'm comfortable, if it is exactly that, buying time, it's such a nervous tick of like, people know this is what we do. It's okay if I swear while I'm thinking of something. It's kind of funny, but it's not really. I should probably work on that. Anyway,
I feel like it's
think
become a
too,
habit. Definitely, it's become
Sorry.
No, please,
I think too. Swearing comedy has always been there since swearing existed, right? Which is probably, I don't know, forever. I think swearing has always been there, but I think part of what has changed is the way general society reacts to swearing. These days has definitely changed, and like how many people are swearing. Because I know, like when my parents were children, it wouldn't have been, if you'd sworn in a class, the teacher probably would have been more annoyed than now when we swear in class all the time. The teachers are kind of like, oh, that's okay. So I feel like sometimes it can be a bit of a social change, and it's a change in our language and the way we communicate, especially with the younger generation, I think.
Do you reckon it could have anything to do with, and this is, I'm actually asking this question to everyone. Do you think that it could have anything to do with, like, didn't swearing used to be something that the lower class, for example, might have used? Wasn't that Wasn't that originally where swearing was? Do you think it's one of those things where they were the people more likely to be the entertainers for the upper class, and now that society seems to be just generally dismantling those class systems, we still just have these remnants of this leftover, like, that's how to relate to the everyday person, or, do you know, like, could there be that?
I think it might partly be that, but I mean, there's also, you know, something in comedy where, you know, like, if you're clever with what you're saying, you don't have to swear.
Yeah, I get it. Patty, you're cleverer than me.
I swear, they made me change my set. So
but we did actually make you adapt a little bit of it because of, and again, you know, the reason being that in the audience it was from year 7s up, and there was some content in there that just wouldn't have worked in your favour. Doing the material to year 7s, because you just have year 7s freaking clenching like this, and it wouldn't actually be like life-changing or anything like that. So it's like, why you got to know your audience and why put people offside, and if you're going to do that, do it for a very good reason, you know. Yeah. I'm not saying don't do it, just have a good reason to do it.
I was just going to say, censorship. We have different censorship rules as well now, and I think I'm imagining the outtakes from Bob Hope's show that possibly might have been filtered with a whole lot of expletives, but we have social values and censorship has changed as well, and I think I agree with you too, Patti. The more that language shifts, the more it enters the vernacular and the common speak, and we just say that's the truth and authenticity that we're kind of dealing with in comedy, and but I also agree that it's well placed and it's intelligent and it's not punching down. It's how, I think. But
it's amazing. You just Bob Hope. So one of my favourite shows is The Golden Girls. Right? It is one of the best written sitcoms. It is. It's so funny. But when Golden Girls first aired, I mean, the content that they were talking about would have been considered very offensive at the time, or, you know, edgy and pushy, but they did it well. Watch The Golden Girls. Next question. This person here?
Me? Okay. Well, firstly, thank you so much for everything that you've said so far. It's been a really, really insightful talk, so thank you for everything that you've shared. So my question is, what can educators, teachers do outside of class clowns or Melbourne International Comedy Festival events to encourage, foster young people to be involved in comedy, and how can we increase young people's representation in comedy?
Great. So we're working on it. We've created some programs with the Arts Centre, like LOL Squad and Up Next. So the people who have come through Class Clowns, who show a genuine passion and interest, we're trying to engage people through teaming up. This is interstate as well, and bringing people to Melbourne. Doing like week-long workshops where people can write comedy and film sketches, and we also do Up Next Comedy during the festival, which is a live comedy show, and have mentors, and we're hoping to turn that into a once-a-month regular comedy room. The reason being that absolutely we see that as a thing, and because, you know, there's so many young comedians who can't just, and why would they want to go to pubs and do comedy? And so it's coming is what the answer is. So there's you know, comedyfestival.com.au. Check that out, and then we'll keep you posted. But
I need to
absolutely
interrupt.
would be great.
I need to interrupt if that's okay. I'm so. Oh, sorry.
Of course.
Sorry. No. To answer your question, we need more people like Wes. Like, you know, he read out what his CV is, but this guy goes above and beyond. This is somebody who actually genuinely cares about empowering young people and people who are quite often marginalised from the sort of the mainstream or the dominant discourse or whatever, you know. It's like people, one person can make such a difference, but this guy is changing the world every year. Seriously, makes such a difference.
Such a lovely man.
But there's
That's right.
But there are, and you can too. There are, but it's about that. There's more options coming, and I think as more young people come out of the woodwork to be interested in comedy, there'll be more opportunities. Absolutely, but I agree. We've got, we also run comedy workshops in schools, etc., and you can and that's becoming more and more and more and more popular, and more comedians are becoming skilled in being able to feel, because not every comedian can just walk into a classroom and go, hey, let's write a joke. Like, there's particular temperaments and particular people who have that same passion, like Steph, who can do it.
If I was a young person, if I was 15 and into comedy, well, I'd be trying out improv as well, like actually improvisation, and there's lots of ways you can kind of get into that. I think that's like a training ground for comedy. So, if you've got young people who are saying they want to experience, want to do stand-up, I would also get them to try out improv, because that's thinking on your feet, that's learning the art of storytelling. How can you actually, make things up on the spot, and it's essentially, it is a comic kind of form, improv. So.
Yeah, some kids are really physical too, and they really enjoy that improv approach. And
it's training that muscle, right? Because that's the other thing too. It's like getting, it's comedy's like a muscle, and you just, if you the skill of it is getting more and more stage time and being active within it. And because you might not do comedy for 5 years, and then it might take a while to get back into that world of it. So improv is a great way to train the muscle. 1 minute-ish left. One last question.
My question was about ad hoc thinking on your feet, sadly. So you've just covered that one.
Great. One more quick question then.
I was just wondering if you had any thoughts about why Melbourne has become a bit of a comedy epicentre. Maybe you answered it in one of the previous questions about your good work, Wes, but yeah, I'd like to know why. Have we just been hit with the funny stick? Or?
Well, I think the festival certainly has something to do with it. I mean, 33 years in, and it's, when the comedy festival first started, it was just on a night. And then it went into a weekend. And there was a venue called The Last Laugh. It was kind of born. And it was a couple of people who really, really went, this could be a thing. And then that's taken off. And the festival director, Susan Proven, has really, taken that forth and taken it to all others. And was the director who put programs like Deadly Funny and Class Clowns on the map, and just kind of went with those ideas and went, yeah, this could be really helpful for people. So I think the festival certainly has given, it's one of the biggest events in Melbourne, like biggest festivals in the world, actually. So there's certainly that. And because of that, I'm finding more and more that lots of comedians are like Reece Nicholson, who's a great comedian, lived in Sydney. He moved to Melbourne because just to be around the comedy scene. And even though, because there's comedy happening all year round, and there's rooms everywhere, not all are great, let's be honest. But that, in order for something to be good, you have to kind of have some crap as well. So, no, but that's the reality of it. But I think it's flashing at me. We're running out of time. Do you want to add to that? Any Melbourners what's the comedy scene like in Bendigo, Patti?
Ooh, I am the comedy scene in
You're
Bendigo.
Great.
I'm kidding. No.
Great.
I think in Bendigo and Castlemaine, where I'm from, it's not really there for the younger people below 18. I think most of the available comedy stuff is like pub gigs and stuff where you kind of have to be over 18 to do it, for people to kind of take you seriously. And I think Melbourne's probably quite a good place to do it, just because it's so accessible to everyone.
Get a fake ID, Pat. Everybody wants to watch you.
Yeah,
I'm serious. Somebody sort it out. You're going to change the world, eh?
So thank you very much. Evan, have we convinced you that comedy can be taught?
Well, I think I did qualify myself.
Yeah. Yes, good. And on that note, thank you very much, everyone, for coming. Thanks to the Wheeler Centre. Wheeler Centre. Thank you very much to our panellists. And go see comedy. comedyfestival.com.au. It's happening right now.
Visit wheelercentre.com for the best in books, writing and ideas from Melbourne, Australia and the world.